fuck? Okay, this should be interesting.
Hello there, have you ever found yourself bored on the weekends? Played all of your games? Then how would you like to get into the exciting new world of importing?
Okay. What's importing?
Importing is the concept of bringing any item from a foreign country into yours. For example, Cadbury is a UK sweet that the Hershey company imports to the US on a daily basis. In fact, most items in the US are imported from other countries like China, India, the UK, Canada, and the subject of today's video, Japan.
Really? Japan?
Yes, Japan. For as many people know, most of our high-end electronics are made in the country. This is especially true for today's subject, video games.
I guess that makes sense. Oh, wait, most systems have a region lockout on them. Wouldn't I have to also import in the system in order to play those games?
That is correct, but as you know, recent devices and methods have been found to circumvent the lockout chip. In fact, Tony, you covered this back in September 2019 in an episode of Mini Reviews. It was your final episode.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Man, that was a while ago. My question then is, where should I start? What game should I get? Better yet, what system should I import for? And more importantly, how much is this going to cost me?
All of those questions will be answered and more in The Joys of Importing. The start of any importing journey usually begins with picking out the game you may want to bring in.
No. I feel like I could take it over from here.
What the fuck?
Really? I thought you didn't know the importing scene.
No, I was playing up the dumb angle just for the start of this video.
Okay, it's all yours, I guess.
Thanks. Folks, look, importing isn't really that hard. It just takes a lot of research, time, and patience, I guess, to find a game from overseas that you may be satisfied with.
I suppose the best way to start conceptualizing the importing process is to decide what kind of games you may want. This could come from a variety of sources, and honestly, I think we should discuss those sources, as sometimes it helped me decide what games I should bring into my own collection. It may actually help you. Sometimes content can be different across regions, and that's when you may consider getting an alternative version of a game. You see, between the mid-80s and mid-90s, Nintendo was in a bit of a censorship wave. Any game that came to the United States from Japan had to have content altered. This was because Nintendo was selling the NES in the United States as a kid's toy, while in Japan the Famicom was sold as a video game console for kids and adults alike. So in Japan, most of the Famicom games that were released were given less restrictions, thus allowing more risque content like alcohol references, character smoking, Nazi imagery, blood and violence, and of course, scantily clad nudity.
What?
Now, of course, as the mid-90s came around, Nintendo of America started to get a little more lenient thanks to the introduction of the ESRB. Now, that's not saying NOA was going to allow Super Nintendo games with Nazi imagery or full-on nudity.
Why do you keep cutting back to me?
But they were going to be a little more relaxed on the amount of violence shown. What this means, though, is that there's about a generation worth of games that got, in most cases, altered due to NOA's censorship. So I would say that in itself is a strong case towards importing. The idea of finally playing some of these games as their developers had originally intended. Think about it, the original versions of Castlevania, Metal Gear, Street Fighter, Final Fight, Fatal Fury, amongst many other games. I know it's odd that I'm mainly focusing on Nintendo for this reason, but that's because neither Sony nor Sega, to my knowledge, ever went to those extremes with their censorship. I mean, there's an alteration here or there with a few games, and the worst Sega did was fail to just fully introduce the US to Puyo Puyo until the mid-2000s. But in my honest opinion, those were small potatoes to Nintendo's censorship wave of 85 to 94. Another reason a lot of people usually get into importing is for the Japanese exclusive games. Every system has a good chunk of games that were only released in Japan. The reason for their exclusivity can usually be boiled down to a few factors. 1. It could be considered difficult and expensive in most cases to localize. A good example of this is Mother 3. This game was considered for localization back in 2003, but given how much story would not only have to be translated, but possibly censored or cut, Nintendo decided it would not be worth it to bring it over. That decision has haunted them to this day, as many Earthbound fans have been demanding for Nintendo to release the game since 2004. 2. The game may have been made for a niche audience. The best example of this I could give is the Sega Mega Drive game Battle Golfer Yui. This is one of my favorite Mega Drive games, as it mixes two of my favorite things, golfing and RPGs, into a crazy and twisted adventure. But the question I'm sure the Sega staff asked each other after making it was, would anyone buy this outside of a handful of people here in Japan? And the answer to that may be a resounding no, because the genre of the game, sports RPG, was not that prevalent back in the late 80s and early 90s. It would have made no sense for Sega to release this internationally. Nowadays, that would be considered an indie title for a company. 3. The game was produced before or as the series became popular. The best example of this is Pocket Monster Stadium, which was released in 1998, right at the same time Pokemon Fever had hit the US. So you would think that Nintendo would want to get this game released as soon as possible in America, but they didn't. Now, the reason could have been that this game did not have a huge Pokemon roster, only clocking in at 42 characters. Or it could have been that this game was produced originally for a Pokemon tournament that was taking place around the same time as the game's development, and so it was decided to use the tournament as a big test and promotion for the Stadium flavor. Whatever the case, the US wouldn't see a Pokemon Stadium game until 1999, with the localization and release of Pocket Monster Stadium 2. Man, I should remind myself to do an episode on these games. I mean, I didn't even cover the series was a trilogy on the N64. Oops. And 4. The game releases too close to a console launch. This is the big one that happens a lot. When a game that was in development for 2 to 3 years is about to release around the time a new console is about to launch. The most prolific examples of this are Mother for the NES planning to release a year before the SNES is set to launch in 1990, and Debutsu no Mori or Animal Crossing for the N64 in 2000, a year before the GameCube launch in 2001. These events could lead to the game being dropped from localization and release, or in Animal Crossing's case, being remade for the new console with some updates. Sometimes this could have the opposite effect, where it's released near the end of a console's life. Either way, there's a huge slew of last state or console transition games that have never reached the US. Let's say you're an otaku like I am. Yes, I am acknowledging that I am saying that out loud. And you may discover that your favorite anime or manga series had a few, or in most cases, a slew of games based on it that were or are still being released. For example, I am a huge fan of the 90s anime classic Cowboy Bebop. A few years ago, I discovered through the YouTube channel Did You Know Gaming Sideshow Region Locked that a couple of games based on the series were released for the PlayStation 1 and 2. A year or so after that episode aired, I had enough money to at least import the PS1 game and its 2001 budget re-release that contained alternate cover work on it. And yes, I am looking forward to getting the 2003 PS2 release in the near future. The point I'm getting to is that if you are someone who is a fan of anime, I would recommend looking into the history of the franchises to see if there were any games produced based on the material. Heck, I do that now with any new series I come across. Sailor Moon, Magic Knight Raiders, Slayers, Love Hina. Heck, even a short-lived anime is bound to at least get 1 or 2 games produced during its run. A few series, on the other hand, have had such a surge of games it starts to feel pointless getting them. Series like Doraemon, Dragon Ball, One Piece, and Naruto have in some cases over 50 games in their franchise. Fuck, sometimes even in the case of Doraemon it can be over 100. In those situations, I would do some more research and just pick and choose which games to get. For example, I have the first home console games for both Doraemon and Dragon Ball. But on the other hand, I have almost all of the Sailor Moon games that were released on the Super Famicom. Yeah, with Sailor Moon, there were 9 games for the Super Famicom. I have 6 of those 9. I'm missing 3 of them due to their prices. That's not including the Game Boy games, which I have all 3 of them, the PC Engine games, there's 2 of them, PlayStation 2, Sega's consoles from 89 to 95, 3, and the DS has 1. The point being, though, that when it comes to Sailor Moon on the Super Famicom, I almost have them all.
So as you see, your first steps into importing can be a little daunting, but if you keep your options open, have a decent amount of understanding of what you're exactly looking for, it'll be easy to know what game you will definitely be looking for. Because we haven't even hit the hard shit yet.
Shit.
Alright, time for part 2.
So you've decided what game to import. Nice! Now comes the hard part, trying to find the game for a decent price. Yes, if there was any pain in the ass moment for not only importing but game collecting in general, it was trying to find something in this day and age for a good price.
Now, the obvious move most people make is just buy the games online, have them shipped to your house and think nothing of it. But when discussing the prospects of ordering imports online, there are a lot of places to look, compare, and price check. The first sites that pop into most people's minds are Amazon and eBay. While both these are no-brainers and nice sites to search through, each one has its own set of problems. Let's start with Amazon. Oh god, Amazon. My issues with Amazon can mostly revolve around 2 cases: the item's availability and price. With Amazon, the availability of an item can sometimes be random. If you were searching for, let's say, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 or Sonic Spinball, you'd be given a couple options. But the problem is those options could be bootleg or reproduction cartridges. Now, if this isn't a problem for you, then that's fine. But I think I could speak for most collectors when I say no one would want to have a reproduction or bootleg cartridge in their collection. To make matters worse, if you are able to find any official version of the game, you could be stuck paying an exuberant amount of money for it. And this is including any used or previously played copy.
For example, I bought this copy of Usurietsuura Endless Summer for the DS back in January of 2020 for about $20. Right now, at the time I wrote this episode, the price for this game went up to $52 used, $104 new. That is a huge markup for 10 months. How about another example? My copy of Super Smash Bros. DX for the GameCube I bought in July of 2019 for around $20, the same price I paid for Yasuri at Zero for the DS. Currently, at the time of writing this episode, the price has went up to $23 used. Okay, that's not bad, that's a $3 markup. But for a new copy, it is $268. That's insane. And I understand it's Super Smash Bros., but really? $268? That feels more like the ending bid on an eBay auction than it does a price of a new game. Speaking of eBay, segue.
When it comes to eBay, can I be honest with you? eBay is a website I can surprisingly trust more than Amazon. I know, shocker, right? But seriously, I trust the site more because I have bought most of my imports through the sellers on this site. The sellers, may I add, are the kindest people you will ever interact with. If I had an issue with an item that I received, like it was a wrong item or it came in damaged, they were responsive within at least 24 hours. Now granted, most of the sellers I bought from came straight from Japan. The fact that they were able to at least offer a solution to my problem, like a refund or sending out a replacement copy, really says a lot. Now with that being said, I do have a few issues with the website. Like I stated with Amazon, there are a few times I come across reproduction cartridges and bootlegs, and those can make any buyer like myself a little weary about buying any game from the seller or the game itself. Another issue, again like Amazon, could also be the price. Yes, every once in a while you will come across a game that may be common, but contains an insane price. Some examples I have gotten were Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and Sailor Moon S Draghi Ranku. All three of these games hit close to the $30 marker. Now granted, it's a possibility that Sonic the Hedgehog 3 could be a harder game to come by in Japan, given the fact that it released around the time Sega was looking to move from the Mega Drive to the Saturn. Then there are some games in which the price is good, sometimes great, but the shipping is what kills it. Now that could be for a number of factors, like the ability to track your package insurance, or the fact that shipping overseas could cost a lot of money, especially in these troubling times.
So let's say this copy of Super Real Mahjong P4 costs $5.50. That's not a bad price. But then to get the package here without being delayed is an additional $20. Damn, I'd rather find a US seller of imports, or at least a seller that doesn't charge an arm and a leg for shipping. Yeah, fuck it, that was a segue.
So you don't want to shop on Amazon, you may not trust eBay, then what's next? Well, there are a few shops online that specialize in importing games. Websites like RetroGamesJapan.com that specialize in selling imports within the US, and J4U.com specializing in selling imports at a cheap price straight from Japan. Now, if there was a small issue with these shops, it's that when they sell out of a game, they sell out. You would be lucky to come across another copy in their online store within the following weeks to a month. Meanwhile, if it was Amazon and eBay, you could just look to another seller with the same item. All you would have to do is pray that it's the same or similar price. With that said, shops that sell various versions of games like PlayAsia could have multiple copies of the game that you're looking for, but they may sell for ridiculous prices. Sometimes games go for upwards of $100 to $250. At that point, I'd rather go to a shop and pray they sell some imports. God damn it, that was a segue. Let's say that you don't want to wait for the game to ship to your home if you're ordering online. Then the next logical step would be to head out to a local game shop, right? Well, if you're lucky, you might find a shop that sells imports out in the open, but that's like a four-leaf clover in a clover patch of game shops. No, the reality of imports at game shops is if you're in a large city like New York or Seattle, you'll be more than able to find a shop that straight out sells imports, like Video Games New York or Pink Gorilla. But if you're in a smaller town or community that has at least one or two local game stores, you might not find any, or they might have some in their back storage room. Sometimes it doesn't hurt to ask the clerk at the counter, Or better yet, try to make a bond with the staff at some of the local game shops, because you never know when they might randomly come across a box full of imports, or might get some traded in and decide to get a hold of you to let you know. Now, if you do come across or get in imports and they don't have what you want or need, I would still recommend grabbing what they have, because sometimes there might be a diamond in the rough within their possession. You never know. If I did have an issue with looking through game shops, it's that while at first you may look through and just see what they have, grabbing only 1 or 2 games, what's left may stand there for a long time until either you give in and grab the rest or someone else does. Another issue sometimes, the game shops could charge too much. Nothing against my game store brethren, but
This is a pile of games from a few of the upstate New York game shops. Out of all the games I bought, about 7 or 8 of them are over the $30 mark. For example, Love Hina Advance for the Game Boy Advance. On average, this game goes for about $45 to $60. At Pastime Legends in New York, I only paid $35 for it. Similarly, from the same shop, I also got the King of Fighters 96 for the Game Boy. On average, online, this goes for about $95. $95! That's insane. At the shop, I only paid $46.
now that's not to say every game I bought from the shops were over $30. There were some games I bought that were at really cheap and good prices. My philosophy when it comes to buying imports from a local game shop: if they have imports and you're in the mood to surprise yourself with a random game, then ask, look through, and pick whatever may look interesting. And if you don't have the system for the game, then look at what made you want it and what methods there are into playing the game. But research is the name of the game when it comes to killing time until you may get your package. Get ready for the wait from hell.
Off of me. Part 3. Here we go.
At this point, you should have ordered your game online, I hope, and you're now stuck with the realization that you're going to have to wait 3 to 4 weeks for your game to arrive.
Son of a bitch.
So what's the best way to kill those weeks off until your game comes in? Well, in most cases, this is when I would recommend doing some more in-depth research into the game, looking at reviews, gameplay footage. Better yet, if you discovered that the game was released in the US, look into finding a copy of that version. Or if you have it, play it for a bit to see if you may enjoy it. Better yet, look for comparison videos of both versions if that is the case. The honest truth of this part is that either you may get yourself super hyped up waiting for the arrival of the package, or you may get excited for a few days, but then eventually forget about it until it arrives. I would also check into and make sure you have what is needed to run those games. I know it's a weird thing to bring up, but it does help to understand the methods in region unlocking. Lucky for you, I did a video on this back in September of 2019, so I'd recommend watching that for a more in-depth explanation of region unlocking methods. To simplify everything, if it's an SNES or an N64, then all you have to do is mod the cartridge tray. If it is disc-based, you're going to have to just buy a cheat disc. And if it's a cartridge system that can't be modded, then either get that system from that region or get a conversion cart. I really don't have anything else to say. If you're just looking for a good way to kill time, just play a goddamn game.
Finally, the last part.
So your game has finally arrived. Now you may be sitting there saying to yourself, it's all over, right? The game came in, and now I can just put it away or play it. Well, there is a few more things you should know when you receive your package.
Oh my god, there's more?
When you open the package, look for any potential bonuses that might have come along with it, like for example, inserts advertising the seller and any deals they may have, little trinkets the seller may send out as thank yous for your purchase. Like a shuriken that I had received twice from one seller after buying a couple games off of them. One of the best ones yet was getting a Bandai Namco advert in one of my latest orders. This advert covered the early releases for the Switch and the PS4, which was odd because the game I had ordered from him was a Sega Saturn game.
But the real thing you have to check on though when the package arrives is the game itself. I know, doy, right? But it's important to check the game for any damage that may have come to it. For example, this copy of Sailor Moon R for the Super Famicom is a replacement copy I had to buy, as the original was indisposed. The cartridge came in cracked and essentially broken. I messaged the seller and had to get a refund on the game, then go out and look for a replacement copy. Another time this happened to me was when I ordered a copy of Lupin the Third SD for the Game Boy. When the cartridge came in, the top was cracked and broken in. I had to get another refund for it. Sadly, though, I have not been able to find a decent price replacement for the game. So if this happens to you, message the seller you bought it from and make sure to take pictures, because like an apartment, they will want photographic proof. After that, the seller may take a day or two to process a refund to your account and send out a message and apology. They will not or ever exchange the broken copy for a replacement new copy. Trust me, I tried. Other times, if it's not a broken game, it's the wrong game. This happens for a lot of reasons. The seller or their helper accidentally grabbed the wrong game from their collection and or stock, or in other cases, the seller is overworked, and with orders and overtime, the orders start to get mixed up. I've had this happen to me a couple of times. My simple advice is to assure the seller that it's okay. If they messed up and you get a game you didn't want, message them and let them know, see if you could arrange to send it back. But if you get a game you didn't ask for but are not willing to put up a fuss over, then just do the same thing. Message them and let them know that you have received the wrong game, but you are willing to accept getting it instead, and will just look for a different copy at a similar price.
For example, this is my Japanese copy of Luigi's Mansion for the GameCube. I got it from one of my many eBay sellers in Japan. Now, I wasn't supposed to get this. I had no intentions on getting the GameCube game at the time. The order I had placed with him was for a copy of Pokémon Stadium 3 Gold and Silver. This wasn't the first copy of the game I had received that week as well, as there was another seller I had bought a Sega Mega Drive game from that sent me a copy of this by accident earlier in the week. After the struggles and hurdles I had to jump through with him and the buyer that got my game, I decided with this second mistake to let it go and just let the seller have me keep the game. The second seller agreed to this, so I got a copy of Luigi's Mansion for $5. Now, on the other hand, sometimes these mistakes could be blessings in disguise. For an example, I had ordered some games for a future console that I wanted to get for a future episode of Imported Monthly. The games I had ordered were a puzzle game, 2 RPGs, and 3 games based on a popular anime series. Now, when the order was all said and fine and everything started to come in, the RPGs showed up fine, the puzzle game showed up fine. The anime games, though, was a whole different story. One of the games showed up a little bit earlier than I intended, and the problem was this was the wrong game. So the game that I was supposed to get never showed up, and the game that I had already ordered that was supposed to come a few weeks later did show up. What essentially resulted was I had to contact the eBay seller to let him know what the heck had happened, and then I had to contact the Amazon seller to cancel my order when I explained to him what had happened as well. Then I had to go back to eBay, find another copy of the game, thank God at a cheaper price, and complete in box, and order that one, and that one showed up 2 weeks later, instead of the one that showed up by mistake. Is this confusing? Trust me, when the episode comes out, you'll know. You'll know. But if you end up not having to deal with any of that and the packages come with no cracks, scratches, or tears on the label, then all you have to do is pretty much whatever you want to do. Immediately play it, show it off to your friends, see if they get jealous, or place it on your shelf and just admire it. I guess. It's whatever you want to do. And with that, we're at the end of our journey. I hope you learned a few things that can help you in deciding whether or not you want to do this form of game collecting sometime in the future.
Well, thank God for the Nintendo eShop. I'll never have to go through all of that shit ever.
In the late 90s, Pokémon was deep into the height of its popularity in both the United States and Japan. By 1999, there were 3 games for the Game Boy, Pokémon Red, Blue, and Yellow, as well as games for the Game Boy Color like Pokémon Pinball, Microsoft Windows like Pokémon Play It, and the N64 hit Pokémon Snap had just been released. Plus, the announcements of Pokémon Gold, Silver, and the trading card game all coming out the following year of 2000. Pokémon was shaping up to soar with their popularity into the 21st century, but a question that many fans had on their minds back in the cusp of the new millennium started to form. Pokemon Snap is nice and all, but will we ever get a Pokemon battle game for the home console, the N64? And of course, Nintendo, HAL Laboratories, Game Freak, and Creatures Inc. would answer that question in 2000 with Pokemon Stadium. But if you were living in Japan in good old 99, you already got to play Pokemon Stadium, and Pokemon Stadium 2, and you were awaiting the announcement of Pokemon Stadium 3. So what's the story with Pokemon Stadium? And why did Japan get a trilogy while we got a duology? I mean, it's interesting. Japan and the US were both in the peak of Pokemon fever in 1999. In Japan, the card game had become a success, and Gold and Silver were about to release with plans for Crystal to come out the following year. The anime was riding high going into its 3rd season, and a huge slew of new Pokemon merchandise was being released almost every week. While in the United States, the card game was taking off just as Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue were hitting huge sales numbers following its 1998 release. On top of that, the anime was becoming such a huge hit on Kids WB going into the 2nd dub season that the network heads at the WB were looking into the possibility of shuffling the network lineup to include more important material. On top of that, the success of the anime also led to the other big kids network competition, Fox Kids, into doing the same thing, leading to the release of Digimon from Bandai later on in 1999, and Flimp the Time Detective from Sanrio in 2000. These successes would eventually also lead to Pokemon's then dubbing partner 4Kids Entertainment to license more anime from Japan for dubbing, like Sonic X and One Piece, to sell to networks like Fox and the WB, and eventually later on the CW until 2014. So why did I just do a deep explanation of the success of the Pokemon anime when this should be about the N64 games? I don't know. I guess just to give an example of how successful Pokemon was at that point in time. And that's not to say Pokemon's not as popular or fell out of style nowadays. I mean, the games are still coming out, and the anime is running into its 24th season. And cards and other merchandise are still being produced. I guess the point I'm trying to get to is that when kids back in 1999 were excited to see Pokemon the first movie in theaters, Burger King was making a shit ton of money off of the movie tie-in meals. And shows like South Park and Recess were parodying the popularity of the property so much that the question of will this be a fad was almost completely shot down by the mid-2000s, and that kids who grew up with this series are now either artists, voice actors, game developers, or scientists in certain degrees. Yeah, that's how huge Pokemon was. With that popularity, the intentions of releasing some Pokemon games for the N64 was inevitable. So, the first N64 Pokemon game ever to be released was Pocket Monster Stadium in Japan in 1998, and so our story begins. It was 1997. Nintendo had just released the highly anticipated Nintendo 64 a year prior, and at first sales were good, but a little sluggish when compared to Sony's PlayStation. Nintendo, however, was not deterred as they had a few tricks left up their sleeve, with the announcement of an add-on for the system. The Nintendo 64 Disk Drive, or the N64 DD. Slated for release sometime in the fall of 97 or the spring of 98. We'll get into this in a little bit. Production on this add-on was considered by some game developers as a chance to expand their creativity, given the fact that the N64 alone was limited in its capabilities due to the format they chose of cartridges. It should be noted that by the time the N64 was out, CD-ROM based games had risen with the popularity of PC gaming, the Sega Saturn, and the Mega CD. This is Sega CD to us Americans. And the Sony PlayStation. Add on top of that CD gaming in Japan had gotten popular after the launch of the PC Engine CD, or the TurboGrafx CD to us Americans again, and the fact that Nintendo inadvertently created the PlayStation after having a falling out with Sony in 1992. Man, I am really getting off track today. So, how was Nintendo planning to upgrade their system with the N64 DD? With floppy diskettes. Yep, Nintendo's answer to the CD was the same answer Nintendo had for the introduction of HuCards, floppy diskettes. This time they were larger, grayer, and more fragile, but the upside to that was that the disc could hold more data. Similar to how the Famicom discs could hold 128 kilobytes of data, the N64 DD disc could hold up to 64 megabits, and with additional internet capabilities via a dial-up modem. Oh my god, I'm getting old. Nintendo hoped that this add-on would satisfy the demands of the mid to late 90s gaming fanbase. With the announcement of the system, Nintendo also announced their huge slate of games for it, including Super Mario 64 DD, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, then known as Zelda 64, SimCity 64, the Mario Artist series, Mother 3, Donkey Kong 64, Animal Forest, and the one every Pokemon fan was in shock over, Pocket Monsters 64, which was slated for release March of 1998. Now, of course, we know that the N64 DD never got any of these games except for SimCity 64 and the Mario Artist series, along with some other games like Doshin the Giant. To make a long story short on the N64 DD, it was released in December of 1999, after 2 years of delay. It had some hidden gems, but was too expensive. The US never got it, even though they were slated to get it in 1998, and the online service was hit or miss. By February of 2001, Nintendo dropped their online service RanNet, and thus ended the life of the N64 DD. But anyways, back to Pokémon. While developing the game in 1997, the higher-ups at HAL Laboratories and the Nintendo EAD were informed that there was a possibility that the N64 DD could be delayed again from its March 18, 1998 release window, and that it would be more ideal to switch production of Pocket Monsters 64, now known as Pocket Monster Stadium, over from the N64 DD to the regular N64, with there being a possible chance in the future for the game to get an N64 DD port that could possibly contain any missing material from the game. After switching over, the development team ran into a snag in regards to the number of characters they could have in the game. The original plan in the N64 DD period was to have all 151 Pokemon creatures available for selection, but once they switched over to the regular N64 cartridges, they found themselves limited to only 42, thus leading to them deciding to have most of the creatures be in their evolved forms. The way they remedied not having all of the creatures in the game was by having all 151 Pokemon available to look up and read in a Pokédex feature, thus keeping the concept of all of them being in the game. Another thing that should be mentioned is how closely tied this game was to the actual Pokemon tournaments being held in Japan at the time. The Pokemon League National Convention was a tournament series that began in 1997, right around the time the game was in development. As a prize for the finalists of these tournaments that year, Nintendo would use the finalists' likeness as computer and tournament opponents in both Pocket Monster Stadium and Pocket Monster Stadium 2. Surprisingly, another issue the developers would constantly run into while developing the game was how to implement in the battle system from the Game Boy games. Enter the late, great Satoru Iwata, who was the president of HAL Laboratories at the time. Iwata had been with HAL since the early 1980s, working on games for Nintendo like Balloon Fight, Golf, and Pinball. On top of that, he had also been fundamental in the development of some games from a then newcomer in the early 1990s, Masahiro Sakurai, and his works like the Kirby series and the Super Smash Bros. Series. Story has it that Iwata spent a whole week having to read over the entire source code from the Game Boy systems, then try to get Shigeki Morimoto's program battle systems from Red, Green, and Yellow implemented onto the N64 hardware. On top of that, Iwata and the crew at HAL also had to get Pokemon Red, Green, and Yellow cartridges to be compatible with the N64. They were able to achieve that by creating the Game Boy to N64 transfer pack. This accessory would end up being bundled with copies of Pocket Monster Stadium. When the game was released on August 1st, 1998, it was a decent success, pulling in 270,000 copies in its first month alone. Overall, the game would sell 1.095 million copies in Japan. This made the game the 5th best-selling N64 game in Japan as of 2003. The game was such a hit that the Pokemon League National Convention's 1998 tournaments would use this game for their events instead of the link cable battles on copies of Red and Green via the Super Game Boy 2.
So here's my copy of Pocket Monster Stadium. I got a complete in box back in 2019. Playing it a couple of times since then, I could honestly say, for being the first Pokemon game made for the N64, it can hold up. It's no masterpiece, don't get me wrong. But it was also the first attempt at doing, at least in a small fashion, a home console Pokemon game. And I have to give it that respect. Am I upset that there was only 42 out of the original 151? Yeah, but at the same time, at least they tried to pick what they considered the best from the original 151 set. Plus, I think that the Game Boy emulation for Red, Green, Yellow is a nice added feature, because in all honesty, we never got a dedicated Game Boy player for the N64. Sure, there was the Y-Boy 64 by Intelligent Systems, but that's more or less used for testing Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games at the time. We wouldn't see another dedicated Game Boy player, well, since the Super Game Boy, until the GameCube was released in 2001, with the Game Boy Player add-on coming in 2003. You know, looking back at this game, it gives me an understanding as to why Nintendo may not have wanted to release it at the time.
Yeah, when going through the sales figures for the game in Japan and realizing that the game was never properly finished the way that Nintendo and Hale had wanted it to be, it doesn't surprise me that Nintendo would decide not to release this in the US. I mean, how upset would you have been a recent fan of the games, the anime, and the cards, to discover that the N64 was going to get a Pokemon game that was only going to contain less than a third of the creatures? I would have been disappointed. I would have felt like I was cheated out of $60 for a game that's only highlight would have been able to play the original games on the TV, something that you were technically able to do anyways with a Super Game Boy and a SNES. Nintendo knew this going into the holiday of 1998, so it was decided for the sake of the US and to capitalize on the popularity the series was gaining not only in the US but in Japan to do a sequel game.
And thus began work on Pocket Monster Stadium 2, or as we know it here in the US, Pokemon Stadium.
Production on Pocket Monster Stadium 2 began as soon as the first game was released. As previously stated, Pocket Monster Stadium was considered incomplete due to Hale and Nintendo having to work within the limits of the original N64 cartridge and hardware. The idea they had originally decided upon back in the spring of '98 was that Pocket Monster Stadium would be a standalone N64 game, with the follow-up Pocket Monster Stadium 2 being an N64 disk drive to fill in the missing elements from the game. While developing the N64 DD version of the game, new developments were being made at Nintendo on the original N64, with the release of a new device called the Expansion Pack. This device would increase the N64's RAM from 4 MB to 8 MB. This will lead to more memory on the system for better textures and graphics, and more game models to be added in certain games like The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, and for better effects like motion blur. The teams at Hale and Nintendo would use this add-on to better utilize the 64 MB of data they had on the cartridge. These would include the inclusion of tournaments consisting of 4 cups, or overall 80 battles in total. The Gym Leader Castle tournaments, in which players had to beat the Kanto region gym leaders and the Kanto Elite Four. Stadium mode, mini-games, a Hall of Fame, Game Boy printer compatibility, and a special battle with Mewtwo. This also meant that more Pokemon creatures can be used, going from 42 in the first game to the full 151 roster in this game. When the game was released on April 30th, 1999 in Japan, it was a slight hit, selling 710,765 copies by 2003, making it the N64's 15th best-selling game in Japan. Because the game was more filled out and fully realized than the previous one, Nintendo of America decided to release Pocket Monster Stadium 2 in the US, renaming the game to Pokemon Stadium almost a year later on February 29, 2000. The US release would become an ultimate hit, selling over 1 million copies in its first month alone, becoming the best-selling console game in the North America region in 2000. Nintendo would later go on to give it a Player's Choice label and reduce the price on December 26th that same year. By the end of the N64's life, the game went on to sell about 3.97 million copies, with 3.16 of those coming from the US.
So here's my copy of Pocket Monster Stadium 2 and its US equivalent Pokemon Stadium. And all I can honestly say is that, yeah, this is a fully fleshed out and realized game that Nintendo and Hale were trying to make back in '98. Whether it was due to time crunch or the technology from the N64 that was not fully there yet, they were never able to fully finish this game, and so Pocket Monster Stadium 2 had to pick up the load where the last game left off. And I'm going to be honest with you, it was a valiant effort. the teams were able to improve upon what was laid down in the original game and add more to it with cups and additional tournaments. With all of that success Pocket Monster Stadium 2 brought, it was a no-brainer for Nintendo to greenlight another sequel.
Pocket Monster Stadium 3 Gold and Silver, no joke, was greenlit because of the success of Pocket Monster Stadium 2, or Pokemon Stadium, in the US. When the team began work on Pocket Monster Stadium 3, the idea they had come up with was to continue with the smooth-outs of the base game from '98, but make some new features like Free Battle, a practice battle where you could set up and train with, and make new adjustments to the code to start the process of integrating the next generation of Pokemon being released. In the winter of 1999, months after the release of Pocket Monster Stadium 2, Game Freak, Creatures Inc., and Nintendo would release the next generation of the Pokemon franchise, Pokemon Gold and Silver, with Crystal being released the following winter in 2000. So it was a no-brainer to have the next Pocket Monster Stadium game focus on the characters from Gold, Silver, and Crystal. This would also lead to a name change during the development when the team decided to rename the game from Pocket Monster Stadium 3 to Pocket Monster Stadium Gold and Silver.
Although I still personally call it Pocket Monster Stadium 3 Gold and Silver.
One more thing to add in regards to the game and its connection with Pokemon Crystal. When Pokemon Crystal was in development, Creatures, Game Freak, and Nintendo had decided to launch a new feature to the game, mobile phone connectivity. In January 2001, Nintendo would partner with Mobile 21 to create the mobile Game Boy adapter. This adapter would allow a Game Boy user to download any additional content for certain games that were compatible with the device, check their emails, send text messages, or play with anyone who had the device over the internet. A total of 24 games were compatible with the device, including Pokemon Crystal. With the mobile GB adapter, players were able to access special Pokemon Communication Center to get later information on the game, play mini-games, and take quizzes via the Pokemon News Machine, link up and trade or battle Pokemon with a friend, and finally they could receive a Pokeball called the GS Ball, which would be used to capture a wild level 30 Celebi and a rare Pokemon egg called the Odd Egg.
Man, that must all sound enticing. Too bad Nintendo shut down the service 2 years later, and those items I mentioned were all part of some special event that only occurred about twice a year. God damn it, Nintendo.
Yep, in December 2002, Nintendo shut down the mobile Game Boy adapter functionalities. They cited that it was because of low sales, with the accessory only selling around 80,000 units. If that wasn't bad enough, another reason that was cited was low traffic. Even with 80,000 units, Nintendo's traffic numbers never made up for that low volume. What also didn't help in those regards were the charges. Oh yeah, that's right, you were being charged for using this accessory. Not only was there a 400 yen or $4 upfront charge just to activate it, there was a fee of 10 yen or $1 per minute you were using it. And that's not also including the charges the cell phone company you were attached to were charging, and the cost of the content. It, in all honesty, was so bad that Nintendo had a rule set that if the total amount of paid content you were using exceeded 10,000 yen, or $100 a month, then you were going to be cut off for that month.
Okay, really got off track there. The question you're probably asking yourself right now is, what does this have to do with Pocket Monster Stadium 3? Well, kind of a lot, seeing as Nintendo decided to add the functionality of being able to view saved battles from the failed service in the game via the mobile stadium. Wow, Nintendo, you are really the gift that keeps on giving.
When the game was released on December 14, 2000, it was released coinciding with the release of Pokemon Crystal. The game was a better success with fans than Pocket Monster Stadium 2 was, selling 780,017 copies by 2003, making it the 12th best-selling N64 game in Japan. The game would get a release in the US on March 26, 2001 under the moniker of Pokemon Stadium 2. This game would be known to the US as the last Pokemon game to be released for the N64, as a few months later the GameCube would be released and Nintendo would start phasing out the N64 going into 2002.
So my feelings on Pocket Monster Stadium 3 Gold and Silver are a little mixed. On the one hand, a lot of time and effort went into this one to really polish up the engine that the team had been using since 1998. However, when you realize that the team literally had 1.5 years to implement in the new characters, functions, modes, and add on top of that the idea that Nintendo wanted you to use this game to view battles from an online service that was only in Japan, expensive, and had the nerve to give you an event that only occurred twice a year, if that for only 2 years, add in the fact that 3 new Pokemon games were being produced at the same time as well, and had to be integrated into this game, I'm kind of mixed on it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the US release is better either. Remember, this was the last Pokemon game to be released for the system in the United States, and we wouldn't see another home console Pokemon game for at least 2 to 3 years. not till Pokemon Coliseum. Now, don't get me wrong again, this one isn't bad, I just have a different outlook on it since I had to do the research on the development of the game. To make a long story short, while it was upsetting to know that Japan was to get a full trilogy out of the spin-off series on the N64, I also can't fault Nintendo at the same time for not releasing the first game here in the US. There were a lot of factors that had to be played for Nintendo to even make that game sell in the US.
Remember, the anime was a few months away from releasing here in the US. The first 2 games were to be released in 1 month for the Game Boy. Nintendo wasn't even sure at the time if the series was even going to work. Had they decided to release it, there could have been one of 2 possibilities. The game releases for the holiday of 1998, closely tying in the release of the anime series in syndication on Kids WB. The kids of the time would have found out about it, got it for Christmas, and either would have loved it and thought it was the game that they were hoping Red and Blue would have been, or for option 2, the game comes out for Holiday 98. The kids who were fans of Red and Blue get the game, only to discover the lack of all 151 Pokemon and additional features set them off, that they decide never to play a Pokemon game again based on this bad experience. The anime possibly flops because of this backlash, and Pokemon never takes off in the US due to the idea that Nintendo rushed a game into development following the surprising success of Red and Blue and made a dud game. Plus, it's not like the US got an exclusive Pokemon game. In 2000, the US and Europe would get Pokemon Puzzle League. This game was based on the anime series and was a port of the Japanese exclusive puzzle series Battle Upon. In this game, you play as Ash Ketchum competing in a Pokemon puzzle tournament against Team Rocket and the Elite Four. So I honestly feel like it was a good trade-off for not getting Pocket Monsters Stadium. In the end, we still got a good amount of Pokemon games for the N64, and I feel like there was a strong enough variety for any Pokemon fan.
Besides, I feel like I wasted most of the episode bitching about the N64 DD, the mobile GB adapter. Plus, I talked about anime in the late 90s. What the fuck is wrong with me? I mean, Jesus, what the fuck?
Catch 'em, gotta catch 'em all. Gotta catch 'em all. Pokemon!
Our main and unfortunately only story tonight, New York State. Yep, our story is on New York State, sadly. We'll never get to hear the story of how Netflix is producing a live-action Pokemon series, or how Tommy Tallarico is wasting all this time and money to produce a game console that no one fucking asked for that was supposed to be out a year ago. No. Our story tonight is on New York State and a controversy from the late 90s that had a profound effect on Nintendo. Specifically, one game in particular, Mario Party. You know, the game you play with your friends when Mario Kart and Super Smash Bros. Wasn't too intense enough. Come on, AJ, beating you as Link in Smash and winning all 5 cups of Mario Kart wasn't enough. I need some real action. How about some Mario Party, motherfucker? Yeah! Anyway. This game was a hit when it was released in Japan in December of 1998 and in the US in February of 1999. Those successes eventually led to a series of so far 17 games as of 2021, with the announcement of Mario Party Superstars slated for an October release. But back to New York and this infamous controversy. Well, you see, all this controversy centered on some mini-games that had you rotating the joystick on your N64 controller. That's right, there was a chunk of minigames from the original Mario Party that had the players rotating the small analog stick around in circles. And remember, most of these games were timed, so if you were to try and complete these games in the time limit you were given, you'd have to spin this around as fast as freaking possible. Now you can see where I was going with this, and why it became so controversial. To make a possibly long story short, the Nintendo 64 controller had a hard plastic analog stick that if you press down hard enough would possibly cause friction and erosion on your skin. Now add the motion of rotating said stick and you get where I'm fucking going with this. In March of 2000, over 100 complaints were sent to Elliot Spitzer, the Attorney General of New York State at the time. Yes, this is the same Elliot Spitzer that would spend $411 on prostitutes each. And then later in 2016 be caught for extortion scandal with a Russian mistress. Anyway, away from Elliot Spitzer, back to Nintendo. Those complaints Spitzer received were in regards to children getting blisters from roughly spinning the joystick around during gameplay sessions of Mario Party. This led to a small investigation regarding Nintendo's commitment to consumer safety, which quickly led to the gaming giant settling the controversy with the state by agreeing to supply protective gaming gloves to families and consumers who could request them, and by paying the state's legal fees, which were estimated to be about $75,000. Now, it should be stated that the gloves that Nintendo were supplying to their consumers were essentially weightlifting gloves that cost about $18 each to produce. If you equate that out to the amount of people who had bought the game and had not filed a complaint yet with the company, the total estimate of how much this controversy had cost the Big N was in the ballpark of just under $80 million. This was according to one of Nintendo's representatives, Beth Lewin. Lewin also stated, however, that in 1999, the year of the game's North American release, the company received only 90 or so complaints, and that she wasn't sure if anyone else was going to take advantage of the settlement. Now I'm going to cast aside the United States for a minute to bring you a quick bit of fun, as it turned out that when the BBC Online reported on the controversy, they found it a bit ludicrous, as one Nintendo 64 UK magazine reporter stated, "We've had the game in the office for quite a while, and our hands haven't been chafed too much. It could only happen in America." The end result of that controversy was Nintendo settling the case with New York State, providing gloves for customers and families who requested them. And the most important one of all, no more quick rotation minigames in any future installments of Mario Party. Following Mario Party 1 and the controversy that arose from it, Nintendo of Japan sent out a memo to the development team on Mario Party 2, telling them that due to the controversy that Mario Party 1 caused, they had to scale back the amount of quick joystick rotation games for Mario Party 2. The team agreed to this, and the following installment would have no minigames in that style. In fact, those minigames wouldn't return until Mario Party Island Tour for the 3DS, when they could utilize a safer thumb pad instead of an analog stick. It's also been rumored that the New York State controversy was also the reason why the game never got a re-release on the Virtual Console for the Wii and Wii U, instead opting to re-release Mario Party 2 and 3 from the N64 era. In fact, Mario Party 1 wouldn't get a re-release until some of the minigames would get utilized in Mario Party The Top 100 for the 3DS in 2017, around the time of the game's 20th anniversary. The funny thing to all this is that no one ever took up Nintendo's glove offer for Mario Party, thus making this entire incident feel like, as the Nintendo 64 UK reporter put it, mildly ludicrous. That's our show for this month. We'll see you in 3.5 weeks for our next episode. Until then, folks, good night. Here it is, guys. I'm so excited. Here we go. Game number 600 and... two. Trust me, there's an entire story behind this. So, 600 games. That's a pretty mighty achievement, I will say. I will be honest, when it comes to my game collection, I don't have the largest. Far none. I never will acknowledge that I have the largest. Hell, comparing it to my friends, I think I may have the third largest game collection. I think my friend Devin, aka D Street, he has over 1,000 games in his collection, and Yosh has got to be somewhere in the 700 to 800 range, maybe tied even with D Street. So the point I'm getting to is that when it comes to a collection, especially a game collection, you always want those milestone games for when you reach a certain point. Usually when you've hit the 100, 150, again, beyond that range, you really want something to be memorable. For example, the 100th game in my collection is actually the Japanese copy of Kirby's Adventure. No joke, this is game number 100, and this actually took me a couple of years to realize, because when I initially did the list originally, I didn't have a set timeline prior to 2017. And so this became 100. And then as time went on and I kept working on the list, reworking it out in terms of timeline, I came to discover that this, Final Fantasy Crystal Bearers, became game number 150. Then, to make it just a little more sentimental, my 200th game was Pinball for the NES. And I'm not talking about the Japanese version of Pinball, I'm talking about the American Pinball for the NES. 250, of course, as many people know, is Mario Odyssey. This was game 250 in my collection. After that came 300. And with 300, that was Chrono Cross for the PlayStation 1. And then when it came to game 350, it was Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo. Game 400 ended up being Dragon Quest Monsters 2 Ruckus. This was, again, surprisingly the 400th game. I didn't have any intentions on this being 400, but it became 400. So, it's another one of these situations that we are currently encountering, but in this case, it was more or less a surprise discovery. In that case, well, you'll find out in a few minutes here. So that was game 400. 450 ended up becoming one of my favorite Sega games of all time, Battle Over Yui. And I was actually extremely happy to allow this to be the 450th game in the collection, because it felt like such a necessary title to be a milestone game. After that came game number 500. And 500 is usually a big deal, especially for up-and-coming collectors. So for me, the 500th game ended up being Animal Crossing New Horizons, a fairly new game at the time when I got it. 550 would end up becoming Famicom Detective Club. And that only counted because the collector set I got also had 549. So it kind of counted on a technicality since it was 2 games bundled in one. Other than that, though, the real question came down to, in terms of my mind, what was 600 going to be? And this is where the story is about to get a little complicated. So, to start with, I really had no idea what 600 was going to be. There was a lot of possibilities running through my head over what Game 600 was. I know for the longest time the idea I had was going to be Doki Doki Literature Club. That was the planned 600th game. But what ended up happening was the physical release date for Doki Doki Literature Club got delayed from the initial August 31st date to September 21st. So we ended up ruling that out as a possible contender. Initially, I had also possibly had hopes that eBaseball 2021 Spirits Grand Slam would have been 600. But going back and reconfiguring a few things, this ended up becoming game number 597. What ended up happening was, surprisingly enough, this was 597, and then we ended up coming across 2 additional games that were downloaded on the Switch that I did not count into the list yet, which were Gunbird and Gunbird 2, and that got us to the number 599. So the real battle for what 600 was going to be was going to come down to whatever choice I had to make regarding getting games for the remainder of Game-O-Rama Uncut season. And I had initially 2 choices in mind. Choice number 1 was Cotton Reboot. Now, Cotton Reboot is, of course, a port / remaster of the original 1993 arcade game, Panorama Cotton, which had also gotten released on systems like the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, and the Sega Saturn. I was really looking forward to this, and trust me, this will be the catalyst for everything we're about to talk about. So, we'll get to this in a minute. The second choice, and this was kind of the backup idea, was going to be Super Real Mahjong 2 through 7 collection. So this is initially a, not really a remastering, but a port of all the Super Real Mahjong games from the Super Nintendo up to the PlayStation 1. And this contains games 2 through 7. And I didn't initially think this was going to be 600. This was always kind of a backup idea. And humorously enough, it was maybe this close to becoming the 600th game. But something ended up happening. So ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce you to the real 600th game, Mario and Sonic at the Winter Olympic Games. So, how did all this happen? Well, here's the story. So initially I had planned on Cotton Reboot being 600. That was the plan from the get-go. And what ended up happening was I set the order for the game through PlayAsia. We went through the usual routine of they get the information day one, the minute I set up the order and all that. And as I usually expected, it gets shipped out the next day. So the usual happens. The order is set up, it gets shipped out the next day. No big deal. In my mind, I'm thinking, alright, it'll be here for the 16th. Not the 16th, the 17th. Give or take. And, so it gets as far, in terms of travel, up to Alaska. Anchorage, Alaska, to the FedEx hub over there. Now, trust me, FedEx is going to be a real bitch in this story. So, it gets to the FedEx hub in Alaska. And, as usual, my initial content was, alright, it's going to spend maybe half a day in Alaska, and then it'll be off and on its way. That didn't end up happening. So, here's what ended up happening. Initially, it ended up in Alaska for about 3 days, is what I predicted. Because as FedEx's tracking system told me, it was set to be here by the 19th. And I was like, alright, kind of a little off of what I expected. Again, usually 17th, 18th, somewhere in that range. A day or so off, I wouldn't really mind. However, the 17th will come, the 18th will come. I knew it wasn't going to come the 18th. That was a pipe stream. The 19th showed up. And at this point, I'm sitting here thinking, alright, it's got to show up. 19th comes and goes. Nothing arrives. So at that point, I'm like, alright, I got to figure out what's going on with this damn thing. Because according to the tracking machine, it still says it's stuck in Alaska. So I'm going to figure this out. I am going to fucking call the goddamn company and put myself at ease and try to figure out what's going on. I gave them a call. I explicitly explained to them what happened and said, hey, this was supposed to be here for the 19th. It's off. It's not going to show up now. I have no idea where it's at. It keeps saying it's stuck in Alaska. Would you look into this? Customer service rep said, absolutely. Yes, we'll take a look right into that and we'll get in contact with the Alaska hub to figure out what's going on. Wonderful. Perfect. Excellent. Nothing to really worry about. We'll give you a call back within about 24 hours. Perfect. 24 hours pass. Nothing. Absolutely goddamn nothing. No call, no reply, nothing. So about 2 or so days later, call number 2. We tried contacting them again. And we got a different guy this time, and we explicitly go through everything that had happened. I say, we were supposed to get this package on the 19th, never showed up. We called a couple days prior to inquire what's going on. They said they'd look into it, give us a call back. Well, it's been a few days, we haven't gotten a call back. They said, alright, let's take a look into this again. They took a look into it again, and they said, well, we got a case number on it, so we're looking into this. Give us another 24 hours and we'll get back to you. And I said, alright, fine, perfect. At this point, my anger is not at a boiling point. That's fine. What struck me, though, was, I believe after that second call, may have been the second or third, this showed up. And I ordered this a day or so after I ordered this. And this got through customs, no problem. No problem whatsoever. It wasn't stuck. I didn't have to call twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times the charm. I didn't have to call, it just showed up. No issue. This, you would assume, would have been 600 then. But no. There's another catalyst to this. Around that same time, I was talking to my stepdad. God bless his soul. He's a very nice man. He does what he can. He's a very, very, very nice man. Nothing to rag on him against this. And he was helping me look for games for our winter session when we get into the winter seasons. And he sent me a photo of this game, Mario and Sonic. He said, found this, do you have it? I said, well, initially I didn't answer back because I was still asleep. But the external note that I made was, no, I don't have that one. He came home hours before I would get this. Surprise, surprise, he got me the game. So that's how this became 600. Was I frustrated? Kind of, a bit. Because I'd expected, you know, Switch import to take the milestone, but it didn't. This got the honor. I'm not 100% upset. He had the best intentions, he did. He did the careful father thing he wanted to do. And I appreciate him for it, and I love him for it. It upsets me, though, that it came at a kind of a freaking rushed time. If that's the best word I'm looking for. So, yeah. This, folks, is the 600th game. love it or leave it, this is 600. Now, I could have pulled any of the older tactics I used to do, like what I did with Mario Odyssey, or anything of that nature, where I would hold on to anything I had gotten prior to that, because I knew this one game was going to be that milestone. But I didn't do that. I just went straight forward. So this is 600. End of story. Back to our story regarding this. So this had shown up around, like I said, somewhere between the second and third call. So we are on now call number 3 with fucking FedEx. And in call 3, I'm told once again, well, we have a case number on it, we're looking into it. For some reason, what Customs is telling us is that there's some issues with the information. And I'm like, well, that's nice to know now. You know, given that we are 3-4 days past the expected shipping in date. Yeah, that's fucking lovely to know now. And they said, well, we'll have someone call you back in 24 hours and they'll explain what's going on. And I said, as long as I can help in any God-given way. Alright, end the call. 24 hours pass. I do get a call this time. Shocking, I know. I got a call this time. The person on the other end told me the reason for the game's delay wasn't because of issues with customs. They told me it was because of bad weather. Now, granted, this was around the time of Tropical Storm Henry, and luckily it didn't hit us. We mostly just got storms. We didn't get like the full-blown that. We just got like heavy amounts of rain. But that was their reasoning as for why the package was being held. Now, frankly, I could understand that. I could get that. I wasn't going to be that upset. Would it have been better, however, had they had put that into the tracking system under like important notices, delayed due to weather, or important notices, delayed due to issues with customs? That would have been reasonable. Would it not have? So, the reason we're now given is weather. Alright, fine. Storms will only be here for a few days, and hopefully it'll eventually ship out, and that'll be it. A few more days pass. Nothing showed up. It's been very fucking nice the last couple days. Nothing came. So, here we go. Another call. And around this time as well, I've been contacting the seller, PlayAsia, to let them know what the hell's been going on. And they were like, well, we'll get in contact with FedEx as well to see what's happening, and we'll try to hopefully get you a more concise answer on all this. Because again, the answers I were given were issues with customs, weather. Those were the two issues I were given. So, let's keep PlayAsia's response back in a little folder right now. So we are on now call number 4. Call number 4. They had gotten back to me once within 3 calls. We are on call number 4. And at this point, I am near fucking just melting rage. I didn't get angry yet. I just called in and said, hey, just wanted to know if there was any additional updates on that case. And if, you know, there's anything I need to supply to help, I don't know. You know, please, you know, let me know. And they were like, we'll give you a call back when we get the time to let you know what's going on. Great, wonderful, perfect. At this point, a week has passed. A week has passed from the initial delivery date. It's supposed to be on the 19th. It is now the 26th. Nothing had come in. We had done about 4 phone calls in a week to figure out where this package is. So, again, week had passed. They told me they'd call me back. Never did again. Only called me back once in those 4 phone calls so far. I allow a few more days to pass, thinking, alright, I'll hear back from PlayAsia, maybe they'll have something. Didn't hear back from PlayAsia yet, so I'm like, great, this is wonderful. Let's give them another call. Call number 5. So we give them the 5th and, at this point, final call. Well, what came at that point, the final call. And at this point, my brain is just fucking burned. I am so boilingly angry right now that I didn't have a screaming match with the customer service rep as much as I wanted to give him a good tongue lashing. I was this fucking furious over everything that had happened and just trying to get some form of a response from FedEx that I finally snapped and I lost it. I said, alright. I said, listen to me. This package has been stuck in Alaska for a week. A week. It was supposed to be here on the 19th. It did not show up. It is over a week past due. They tell me there is a case file being worked on because there's some issue with customs. Then I'm being told it's something about the weather. And then, I'm told I'm going to get a call back and I never get a call back. What is going on? The man's like, I understand your frustration. We are very, very sorry that this had happened to you. Might we recommend, and it was at this point my head's going, if you were about to say contact the seller, I am going to fucking hang up right now. Might I recommend contacting the seller? Alright, that's it. Well, thank you for your helpful information, Mr. Asshole. That's it. End of line. I said thanks. Ended the phone call. That was it. I messaged PlayAsia again and said, hey, I said, I've called these guys now 5 times to try to get information. They've still got nothing. Have you guys found anything yet? Please let me know as soon as possible. I get a message back 2 days later. Oh yeah, FedEx told us that the package was lost. And I'm just like, wow. Wow. It has been lost this entire fucking time. So, again, to clarify, this got through okay, and I ordered this after this. That got through okay, though. This ended up lost. Lost. And they didn't have the goal to fucking tell me that they had lost the package. It's fucking mind-boggling sometimes. I swear to God, it's mind-boggling. But yeah, package was lost. PlayAsia said, we're very sorry to hear that. We'll be more than happy to give you a refund. We want to know, do you want it in, back on your card, or do you want to put it through our wallet system on our website? So that way you could buy a new game or accessory or book or whatever through our website. I asked them at one point, is there any possible way I can get a replacement copy sent, since they had lost the first copy? And they got back to me, thank God enough, and told me, oh yeah, absolutely, we can send you a replacement copy. The difference is going to be, however, if this copy gets lost, we can't refund you again. We can't send another replacement. You get 2 chances. You lose the first package because of them, we'll refund you, or we'll give you the replacement. You lose the replacement, or they will lose the replacement, that's it. Game over. So I'm like, alright. I'm thinking about this for a couple hours. I'm thinking, alright, I gotta figure out what I want to do. Do I want to just do the replacement, or do I just want to get the refund? And I weighed both options, and I decided, you know what, I'll take the refund. Thanks for answering the question, though, in regards to replacement. It does ease my mind a bit to know that you guys do replacement copy assurance. So I ended up ordering this copy off of eBay for like about the same price I paid for it at PlayAsia, maybe an additional $2 due to tax, but it's about the same price. It showed up within about a week, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, my initial thoughts were that this was going to be $600, and then for a while when this was lost, this was going to be $600. But then, in a surprise twist of fate, this became $600. Folks, this is the life of a game collector. This is how confusing it can sometimes be. With that said, folks, this is Tony. I'm signing out. I'll see you all next time. Come on, move. Move, damn you. Fuck. You know, it's funny. I don't really like Pac-Man 99 that much, but yet I find myself playing it still. Maybe it's because this is like Super Mario 35, where it took me a couple of days to get the grip on it, and constantly advance myself somewhere in the top 15 or top 10. Or in this game's case, it's kind of like the top 50 to top 30. Or maybe it's because despite having to blow $15 on a free game, the character costumes that were offered as extras were intriguing enough to cough up $2 for each costume. Or maybe it's because this is the first time in nearly a decade that Bandai Namco has actually given a fuck about two of their classic arcade games from the late 1980s. Bravoman and Wonder Momo. I had planned to start this discussion on the two arcade games by looking into the history of the older one of the two, Wonder Momo, but because Bandai Namco for some reason never released any documentation on the development of the game, I can only give you a handful of facts and information.
Wonder Momo was an arcade game released by Namco in 1987. It was surprisingly one of Namco's last 8-bit games developed for arcades using the Namco System 86 arcade board. This board was utilized for every Namco arcade game released between 1986 and 1987, including an updated version of Sky Kid dubbed Sky Kid Deluxe, the return of Ishtar, the sequel to Tower of Daruga, Rolling Thunder, Hopping Mappy, and the already mentioned Wonder Momo, and one other one we'll be mentioning here in a few minutes. The game centers around a beautiful teen actress named Momo who is performing a live stage show and has to fend off villains from the Wardium Phantom Army. From time to time, you'll have the ability to build up your Wonder Meter, yes, Wonder Meter, and transform into Wonder Momo. This allows you to use more attacks and build up energy for a powerful Wonder Typhoon. While all this is going on, you are also expected to keep the audience and photographers from peeking under Momo's miniskirt. If that occurs, Momo will be stunned for a brief period of time. Now that I got through some of the history that I was able to get on Wonder Momo, plus give you a brief run of the game's plot and controls, I'm excited to say that we can move on to Bravoman. Bravoman was an arcade game released by Namco in 1988. The game was created by Norio Nakagata. Nakagata was a composer for Namco who started the company back in the mid-80s, previously directing the 1986 Namco arcade game, Genpei Tomaden, a hack-and-slash platformer that ran on the previously mentioned Namco System 86 arcade boards. This title has since been claimed to be an early precursor to Bravoman. The idea for Bravoman came when, following the production of Genpei Tomaden, Nakagata wanted to create a game based on the things he personally enjoyed, like synthesizer music in 1930s films. Nakagata took heavy influence for Bravoman from popular tokusatsu and kaiju films like Godzilla and the 70s Kamen Rider, by having much of the game's content be parodies of those respective genres along with some other classic video games at the time. When it came to the sprite animation and character designs for the game, Namco partnered with Japanese animation studio Toei Animation, who were best known at the time for their work on the classic Dragon Ball and the lesser-known classic Majoku Megu-chan. Toei took interest in assisting Namco on the sprite animation and character designs after showing some interest in the anime-like art style and characters. Bravoman holds the honor of being the only game produced by Namco to utilize pressure-sensitive buttons on its arcade machine. With the harder the player presses the button, the stronger Bravoman's punch or kick would be. This would frustrate and annoy the Namco technicians who would have to work on these machines. Bravoman centers on an average everyday Japanese car insurance salesman named Hitoshi Nakamura. This is a nod to Namco founder and president Masaya Nakamura, who is walking home one day when he encounters a strange humanoid-like alien named Alpha Man, who claims to be from a planet of, well, Alpha. Alpha tells Hitoshi of a mad scientist named Dr. Bomb, who plans to, of course, take over the world, doing so with an army of evil robots and a deadly superweapon. Alpha hands Hitoshi a metal rod, a tuning fork, and a 100 yen coin. This transforms Hitoshi into the titular Bravoman, a bionic tokusatsu superhero who possesses telescopic limbs. Now it's up to Bravoman with the assistance of Alpha Man to stop Dr. Bomb and save the world. Now that I cover both history and plots for Wonder Momo and Bravoman, let's talk about their releases. Wonder Momo will be the first of the two to be released on February 24th, 1987. When it was released, it became a decent hit in the arcades in Japan. Honestly, I don't have the actual numbers of the units sold or the amount the game brought in through the arcade. Once again, due to Bandai Namco's lack of publicly released information. This game is also significant as it led to Namco starting up the beauty girl game genre for the arcades. The success of this game would eventually lead to Namco porting the game out to the Hudson NEC console, the PC Engine, on April 21st, 1989. The following year, Bravoman would be released to arcades, releasing May 20th, 1988. When it was released, it also became a big hit in the arcades, receiving praises from the Gamers magazine in Japan, receiving also 3 awards that year. 3rd for Best Editing to a Game in 1988, 12th for Annual Hit Game of 1988, and finally 3rd place for Grand Game of 1988. 2 years later, Namco would port the arcade hit to the Hudson NEC console, the PC Engine, releasing Bravoman on July 13th, 1990, with a US release on the TurboGrafx 16 that October. So here are my copies of Wonder Momo and Bravoman, both for the PC Engine. No joke, these were literally the first games I ordered when I bought my PC Engine back in the summer of 2019. These were also some of the last games I would get through the now defunct JapanGamestock.com. The reason I bought these games I'll get into in a little bit,
but to give you my feeling on these two games as a whole, I love them. Bravoman is a perfect side-scrolling beat-em-up and platformer, and Wonder Momo will probably go down as one of my favorite Namco games of all time, with Mappy being a close second. I love the art style, I love the fighting mechanics, and the overall tone these two games took with their story, comedy over action. These two took advantage of the fact that their stories made no sense and felt so genuinely Japanese that I'm not surprised that the arcade ports didn't get to see a US release, and with Bravoman being the only one of the two to sell in the US on the TurboGrafx 16. I can see why Namco decided not to release Wonder Momo as well, but with all that being said, we now must talk about the aftermath of these two releasing. Let's talk about the 90s. Following the PC Engine port of the game, Namco decided not to do any follow-ups for Wonder Momo, with the only other Wonder Momo project that would come out during the late 80s and early 90s being a brief manga adaptation for Famitsu Comics in March of 1989. After that, Namco would re-release the game for their Namco Museum collection on the PlayStation with Namco Museum Encore on October 30th, 1997. This would only release in Japan, unfortunately. After that, there would be a mobile port of the game released in June of 2005 for Japanese mobile devices. That same year, J-pop singer Haruki Mayomi would release an album influenced by the game called Wonder Momo I, New Recording. This album would utilize the game's main theme along with additional tracks for the transformation sequence, all provided by Namco. The characters from the game would also make appearances in other games such as Baten Kato's Eternal Wings and The Lost Ocean in 2003, where she would appear as a Magnus card. The Japanese exclusive crossover RPG Namco x Capcom in 2005, where Wonder Momo would be partnered up with Bravoman, and Tales of the Abyss the same year, along with the 2011 port for the 3DS, where she would make a cameo appearance as one of the dolls in Anissa's collection. Momo would also appear as in a balloon float in the bonus stage of the arcade game Marvel Land in 1990, and her costume would be utilized in the games Tales of the World, Radiant Mythology 2 in 2009, and The Idolmaster in 2005. Momo would finally get a figurine of her made in 2005 as part of the Namco Girls collection. As for Bravoman, following the release of the arcade game, there were discussions about a possible sequel that would have been released in 1990 for the arcades, called KTEH Bravoman. The game would have been centered around Bravoman, now divorced, unemployed, and homeless, having to fight his way back to his former glory and win back the love of his wife. The game was unfortunately scrapped during the development stages as the team at Namco was unsure if the concept could even work as a sequel. Bravoman would receive a spin-off starring one of the bosses from the game, Pistol Diamo. The game was called Pistol Diamo no Boken and was a horizontal scrolling shooter that was best known nowadays for its outlandish themes and strange character designs. The spin-off would release in arcades in October of 1990, around the same time as Bravoman's US release. As for our titular hero, he would be relegated to cameos similar to Momo, starting with the Japanese exclusive tactical RPG Namco Super Wars for the WonderSwan Color in 2002. He and one of the other bosses from the game, Wayahime, would then make cameo appearances as balloon floats like Momo in Marvel Land. In 2005, Bravoman and Wayahime would appear in the Japanese exclusive crossover RPG Namco x Capcom, with Bravoman partnering up with Wonder Momo as previously mentioned. That same year, Wayahime would also receive a figurine in the previously mentioned Namco Girls collection, as well as an alternate costume appearance in the fighting game Soul Calibur 2. Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U would go on to include the soundtrack to Bravoman as an optional track for the Pac-Man Land stage for Pac-Man in 2014. Things would change, however, as on March 31st, 2006, Namco was merged with the entertainment company Bandai to form Bandai Namco Entertainment, on the wake of Namco's 50th anniversary. Because of this merger, projects that were in the pipeline for Namco, like Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness 2, were cancelled, and side companies like Bandai's Band Presto would be dissolved and absorbed into the main company. This merger, however, came with a few upsides, as Bandai Namco would announce in 2012 a new division of the company called Shifty Look that would focus on reviving some of Namco's more dormant and obscure franchises into new mediums like online comics and animation. And thus, one of the first 5 webcomics that would be announced in 2012 will be a revival webcomic of Bravoman. Created in collaboration with Udon Entertainment, Bravoman's Super Unequaled Hero of Excellence would be released online on March 9, 2012. The focus of these webcomics would be to focus more on the comedic elements of the games, like Hitoshi's poor controls of his powers, as Bravoman and Alphaman's lackluster approach to teaching Hitoshi, to Dr. Bomb's English, and the various bits of meta-humor the writers could get away with.
Written by Matt Moylan and illustrated by Dax Gordine, Bravoman would run for about 300 webcomics until March 16, 2014, when the series would end following Shifty Look's closure announcement. The webcomic was considered a success by Bandai Namco that the following year they commissioned Copernicus Studios to produce a 12-episode web series based on the comic. On May 20th, 2013, the web series would debut on YouTube. Webcomic co-creator Matt Moylan would return to write the 12 episodes along with Jim Zub. For the voices of the characters, Shifty Look would hire famed voice actor Rob Paulsen to play the voice of Bravoman and Alphaman, D. Bradley Baker as the voice of Dr. Bomb and Anti-Bravoman, Rome Dames as the voice of Waiahime, and Jennifer Hale as the voice of Bravo Woman. The series would conclude on February 12, 2014, receiving a mobile game based on the series called Bravoman Binja Bash on August 30th, 2013. Shifting back over to Wonder Momo, Shifty Look would give the series a webcomic as well, with Wonder Momo Battle Idol releasing March 15, 2012. Written by Eric Coe and Jim Zub and illustrated by Omar Dogan, this series took place 25 years following the events of the original game, as we focus on Momoko, an idol who, after failing an audition for a TV show, encounters a race of aliens who give her Wonder Momo's powers. Throughout the series, Momoko must learn to harness the powers given to her as she begins to battle evil aliens and a rival named Amazona, who is later revealed to be, get this, spoiler alert, her mother and the original Wonder Momo from the game. Wonder Momo would make crossover appearances in other Shifty Look productions like Bravoman and Mappy, as her webcomic series would end after 200 strips on March 14, 2014. Like Bravoman, this was done because of the announcement of Shifty Look's closure. However, on January 28, 2014, Bandai Namco would announce that a Wonder Momo anime 5-episode miniseries was in development. Taking influence from the webcomics, the series would be produced by Graphic-ina and would be released through Nico Nico and Crunchyroll. The series would feature the voices of Yuka Fujiwara as Momoko, Misaki Komatsu as Aikyo, and Haruko Momori reprising a role as Wonder Momo from the original arcade game. Alongside the series, WayForward Technologies announced a new game that would be released for Android and Macintosh devices called Wonder Momo Typhoon Booster in 2014. The series would run weekly from February to March 2014, and following the closure of Shifty Look on September 30th, 2014, all of the games that were released based on their works would be delisted from many of the online shops. Sadly, we'll never get a chance to play those games, watch those shows, or read those comics. Following Shifty Look's closure, everything that they did was mostly wiped out. Luckily, someone out there has been archiving all the episodes of Bravoman, Mappy, and Wonder Momo through a YouTube channel called Shifty Look Forever. So if you still want to see these web shows, you can catch them all there. But for me, Shifty Look was the reason I got into these games. It was the reason I got hooked onto them. And it's also one of the reasons that I get so upset when Bandai Namco doesn't really acknowledge them. They would rather focus their attention on Pac-Man, Dig Dug, Galaga, and while I like those games just as fine as the next person, they'll never hold a candle to these two underrated classics. I should also state at this point in time, these two games did get a re-release on the Virtual Console for the Wii in 2007, with Wonder Momo being only in Japan. Thank you, Bandai Namco, you definitely know how to treat your fans. Especially those who like more than just Pac-Man. So I guess to wrap this all up, may I ask you, can you let Hamster Corp do a fucking Nintendo Switch port of these arcade versions of the games? If not, just release the PC Engine versions on the Namco collection for the Switch?
right. Gotta have something interesting in here. You know, it's funny. When I did my whole video on the history of anime coming to the US, I forgot to mention one significant factor that played into the rise of anime in the late 80s and early 90s. And surprisingly, it came from a very unexpected source. So let's talk about San Jose's Channel 54, a PBS station. Yeah, KTEH, San Jose's Channel 54, is a PBS station. And now, this wasn't a case of a former independent station that became a PBS station. No, this was a wholehearted PBS station, and I think it would be best to give some background to the station before we talk about the story of how they ended up becoming a factor into the kickstart of the 90s anime boom.
KTEH Channel 54 launched on October 19, 1964 in San Jose, California. While serving up the usual airings of shows like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Sesame Street, and Nova, KTEH was also producing their own content with documentaries like The Day After Trinity, Aerosol Factor, Kaleidoscope, and Tomorrow Today.
Riveting content, I said in a sarcastic tone.
However, the station would start to gain notoriety in 1981 with the start of their Sunday night sci-fi block. This block would contain showings of Doctor Who, Red Dwarf, and later The Prisoner.
Funny enough, those Prisoner airings would be hosted by sci-fi author and media critic Scott Appel, who would arrange the episodes into a more cohesive series narrative. These would become known as the KTEH order.
Another funny story in regards to the block is how in 1998 it ended up airing the entire 8th season, or 8th series for you Brits, of Red Dwarf all in one night. This led to fans in the US seeing a good chunk of episodes before the audience got to see it back in the UK on BBC Two.
Now, I can hear a bunch of you asking me, how does anime get worked into this? And well, here's the explanation.
In the early 1990s, KTEH's programming schedule had a hole for their 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. slots on the Sunday night sci-fi block. And the story goes that at the time, KTEH's programming acquisition director, Karen Roberts, was flying out to the UK to relicense the broadcasting rights to shows like Doctor Who and Red Dwarf. While flying, she had a layover in Tokyo, and while on the layover, she had seen some Japanese game shows and anime, and started to wonder if the PBS audience in San Jose would have been interested. Thus, she decided to gamble on that notion and made a couple of acquisitions for some small unknown animes and game shows that would have been relatively unknown to the American audience at the time. The early titles that were to run on the Sunday night sci-fi block were Tenchi Muyo, and one of my favorite 80s animes of all time, Yasura Yatsura, both running for a respected amount of time on the channel.
These airings became such a success that it led to the station attracting the otaku community that was starting to slowly grow in the Silicon Valley area in the mid to late 1980s, thanks to independent stations in the area having bizarre airings of older anime and tokusatsu series from the 1960s like Ultraman, Astro Boy, Speed Racer, and more. Along with that, some were able to bring in Japanese recorded tapes of various somewhat more current anime and tokusatsu shows via the underground trading community, thanks in large part to, surprisingly, the furry community during that time. You know, history's kind of weird sometimes.
This would result in the otaku community rallying in PBS pledge drives during the spring and summer seasons to raise money for the station to acquire more programs from Japan.
We have been waiting quite some time to get our hands on Sakura Wars, and we've got it for you now, and it's all in this evening. The biggest drawback to this series is that it has such a limited number of episodes. That we can show it all in one evening says something about that. This, of course, modeled on a famous video game that really took Japan by storm, and much better than most series of that ilk, as you can tell. If you're a real anime fan, you certainly recognize everything that's in it for what it is. Terrific story, interesting characters, marvelous anime, and I don't know if this is the quintessential steampunk anime, but it certainly is a great example thereof.
With later broadcasts of animes like Key the Metal Idol, Dirty Pair Flash, All-Purpose Cultural Cat Girl, Neku Neku, Sakura Wars, Corrector Yui, Serial Experiment Lane, City Hunter, Please Save My Earth, Ranma 1/2, Sailor Moon, Full Metal Panic, Magic Knight Rayearth, Martian Successor Nadesco, Better Man, Robotech, Mobile Suit Gundam, Cardcaptor Sakura, Astro Boy, Gotchaman, and Samurai Pizza Cats, another one of my favorites from the 90s. Sometimes the series that were picked up were subtitled as they never received a proper translation, or they were translated but the broadcasting rights are either too expensive for KTEH or not available, or worse yet, an illegal battle between studios. But for the most part, they were usually dubbed productions that were either meant for syndication or straight-to-video releases, but were sold as broadcasting rights at the time for mostly modest to low prices. This was because the American distributors would refuse to license out the subtitle versions.
What's interesting is I purposely left out one show from that lineup that aired on KTEH. The reason is because it would become a huge success later in the 2000s. This show was Neon Genesis Evangelion. Yeah.
In 2000, KTEH would raise enough money to pick up the subtitle rights for the series from TV Tokyo, and on March 5, 2000, the subtitled series would get its North American debut, predating the debut on Adult Swim by 5 years. But more about that later.
Another show I purposely left out of that lineup was Bubblegum Crisis. But that was for a completely different reason.
When KTEH picked up Bubblegum Crisis in the mid-90s, the series was just getting out of a major legal controversy regarding the rights to the series. Animation studio Artmic and Umex, who jointly produced the series starting in 1987, ended up having a massive falling out following the first 8 episodes. This led to Umex trying to produce a follow-up series called Bubblegum Crash without the involvement of Artmic, which eventually led to various legal issues from 1991 until Artmic's closure and Umex's pickup by Toshiba EMI in 1998.
I weirdly went off topic for that antidote. Anyways.
By the late 90s, some of the licenses that KTEH had acquired for their Sunday night block were starting to expire. Luckily though, KTEH never had to worry about having to drop a show out of their time slot, as they were already in the process of swapping out shows once they finished their episode counts. But this process was starting to get a little harder though, as some of those licenses, mainly the series that could be aimed at kids like Sailor Moon, were starting to get more expensive thanks to the rise of anime's popularity due to the success of Pokémon starting in the fall of 1998. The station, however, was not deterred as long as the San Jose area otaku community kept sending in pledges for particular animes they wanted the station to run. Following their release of Neon Genesis Evangelion, however, the otaku community started to shift away from KTEH. The reason? Well, the day after the release of Evangelion, Cartoon Network's Toonami block started to pierce into the anime genre with the airing of Mobile Suit Gundam Wing. After that, licenses for huge anime series like Gundam and Evangelion started to rise, hitting levels that KTEH could never afford. Because of this, by the early 2000s, KTEH could only afford the licenses to lesser-known series like Rune Explorers, a series that only lasted 4 episodes and ranged from 1995 to 1996.
And sadly, things didn't get any better for the station.
By 2003, the writing had seemed to be written on the wall for the Saturday Night Sci-Fi block. KTEH quietly ended all of their programming on that block, with the only exception being Doctor Who, which would return in 2007 to start airings of the 2005 run of the series. All of the anime series were quietly pulled off the block once their broadcasting agreements were up, and the station couldn't afford the renewal costs.
2006, sadly enough, would be the worst year for KTEH ever.
In 2006, 2 major events would shake up the PBS station's fate forever. One would be the purchase of KTEH to San Francisco's PBS affiliate, KQED, on May 1, 2006. This led to shakeups in management and programming for the station, as KQED stuck to the stricter guidelines of PBS's programming than KTEH did, with a shift towards more elegant and sophisticated programming for the nighttime audience, as opposed to KTEH's programming style, which was centered more on catering to the fandoms for sci-fi and anime. The second event that would happen would be the unfortunate death of Karen Roberts. Roberts would pass away on August 22, 2006, following a courageous long-time battle with cancer. Many say she was instrumental in the development of KTEH's niche programming, and her methods in pleasing the station's fan base by working so hard and through various channels to get the broadcasting rights for the animes that fans have been rallying for with the pledge drives. She had such a devotion to the concept of anime, whether it would be subbed or dubbed, running on KTEH, that she once stated in an interview with the San Francisco Chronicle, "We're excited in having anime in the schedule, and we're hoping with the popularity and success here that we can get other public television stations interested in it."
In the end, while the station is no longer around, there are still plenty of fans from the San Jose and Silicon Valley area that recollect their memories of the 90s of staying up late on a Sunday night to sit down and watch some anime. Now, if you excuse me, I think I'm gonna sit down and just watch a classic.